call this meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals to order, note the time 8:05, but everybody please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we've got two items on our agenda tonight. The first is a carryover from prior meetings. The application of HRR Corp., 12 Sergio Lane, Monroe, New York, for review and administrative determination of the Assistant Building Inspector for an interpretation to permit the use of an assisted living facility / adult care facility in SR10 zone as a pre-existing adult home for mentally disabled, or as a single-family dwelling, or in the alternative, a use variance from the requirements of Section 200, Schedule 1B, Table of Use Requirements in the SR10 zoning district. The current use of property is a single-family home. The proposed use is a home for senior citizens in need of assistance. The property is located, let's see, what's the address here? 236 High Street, and is identified as Section 206, Block 5, Lot 4.12 on the tax map. All right, so at the last meeting, or at the meeting before the last one, we had closed the public hearing. And the board had adjourned for deliberations, and last month, the applicant asked us to adjourn again because we did not have a full complement of the board. Tonight we have 5 members, so the job before us tonight is to discuss the application and to vote on the merits of the application. So, I'm a little hung up on the use because it's been talked about a couple times, adult care versus assisted living versus group home for adults needing some level of intermediate care. I mean, have you determined exactly what this use is classified as?
This is going to be an adult care facility, which is the least amount of care necessary under the Department of Health. You get a particular license for adult care facility. There's another license that can give you an assisted living facility.
Which is a higher level of care.
Which is a higher level of care. And then there's a third one, which is higher, which is an enhanced assisted living.
Okay.
Mr. Mitz has testified that he was looking for an adult care facility for this location. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that it's a for-profit operation in a residential zone, a non-commercial zone.
Okay.
And where does it stop? You do it once, how can we deny the next person who wants to have an exception?
Well, let's determine what we're being asked to decide here. I mean, I know we have comments from our attorney that the application at this stage is I guess a change of use from one non-conforming use to another non-conforming use, which in the opinion of the zoning board is the same or more restricted nature.
Well, we haven't determined that yet.
Well,
that's the question, right?
I disagree because I find the first use, the use by HRC, to be a permitted use. It's a permitted use under statute. It's a permitted use because of sovereign immunity, it being a state agency. That's what I would find for that particular.
Well, we got to the issue of whether it was pattern or non-pattern, right?
Well, it's not pattern, but it's case law. That's if you read this is Exhibit Y, which is the letter from which contains the letter from Building Inspector Cox to Mr. Capella. He states, the property is located in SR10 district and was recently used as an adult home for the mentally disabled by ARC of Orange County. This was operated on New York State mental hygiene law and was considered a permitted use for a licensed operator in any residential district, and it's confirmed in your letter they are entitled to classification as a single-family residence.
Is that April 22nd?
This is the letter of
March 23rd.
2017. It's attached to Exhibit 1.
I have why was the application, right?
Yes.
Here it is. Mental hygiene law is considered a permitted use for a licensed operator.
He then quotes 4134F, which is the paragraph on the Padavan law, which we've already decided does not apply, but it does read.
Right, because it wasn't approved under the Padavan law.
No, but it's, there was, first, the only C of O we can find is the one that was issued in August 1st, 77, which was the C of O to Mr. Lance for one family.
Right.
AHRC then moved in May of 1978. Ativan was in September of 1978. But 4134F is an interesting section in the Padavan law because it states, and this is contained in the letter from Mr. Cox to Mr. Capella, it says, a community residence established pursuant to this section and family care homes shall be deemed a family unit for the purpose of local laws and ordinances. So it says a community residence established pursuant to this section, which would be the Padavan law, and family care homes, which I take it takes care of the myriad of cases which Mr. Capella supplied to us, which held that a establishment for a disabled is considered to be a group home and a single family unit.
Yeah, but I didn't see any other cases that similarly lumped adult care facilities into that.
No. My point is that I would myself do not take this issue as a viable issue. What I would find is that it was a permitted use and that the adult care facility is not a permitted use.
Well, if that's the case and the board finds that, then you would move on to the second line of question as to if it's a family under the village's zoning code.
Whether it's a single family use.
Yeah, now we're getting to the hard ones.
Gosh, I thought that was the
So let's talk some more about the use and the prior use as being a permitted use, which I guess we already have a determination for our building inspector that was a permitted use as a single family. Did everybody feel the same way with regard to the prior use by ARC, that because it was a group home, it's considered a single family unit under state law, and therefore is treated as a single family, and therefore was a conforming use in the SR10 zone as a single family use?
Yes, I agree with that, and based on what I heard, it seemed like they were operating as such. So I think I agree with what Howard said.
Dick, you feel the same way?
Yeah.
Jerry? So then we're not dealing with the change of a non-conforming use to another non-conforming use. So now we have to get to the determination of whether this use as an adult care facility is considered a single family use. So let's look at the definition of a single family use in our code as it stands today. one or more individuals living independently in a single housekeeping unit and using cooking facilities and certain rooms in common. A family shall not be deemed to include the occupants of a boarding house or rooming house, club, motel, or hotel.
I guess before we get into it, let me just make one other statement. When Building Inspector Cox made his determination, he made his determination under the old code. So the code changed on June 13th, 2017. The definition, which I think he relied on based on some notes that I found in the file, was the old definition for
Dwelling
you
unit.
get it not the housekeeping unit, but for,
Dwelling unit?
yeah, dwelling unit. Yeah, the old dwelling unit. So he made his determination on that. Now dwelling unit has been changed, so we have to now go back to the definition of family.
As it stands today.
Stands today.
Yeah.
Not in the
No,
determination.
no, okay, so
Because we need
we're
to-
basically,
We need to apply the law as it stands
that's the
today,
case today, yeah.
not as he.
So we have an ironic situation because of the fact that the building inspector was correct, but we may make a determination that under the present law, it's been a change.
Any decision that this board makes, I will include a footnote that references the building inspector's initial determination and how the code changed, and that the application is conforming, the evidence provided, it will be in accordance with the new code, is what this board is following.
Okay, so now on to the,
Now on to the problem.
now on to the second question. Is the type of use as described by the applicant during the application and as testified to during these hearings considered a single-family dwelling?
And I think it comes down to 3 words: living independently in. You take those 3 words out, well, you take out the word independently, and you just say one or more individual living in a single housekeeping unit using cooking facilities, it would be no question that it would be a single family. The question is, what is the meaning of the part that reads living independently in? And would people in an adult care facility be considered to be living independently in the facility? The original code read living independently as a single housekeeping unit. The only change in this section was they changed as to in. But I think that might have some bearing only because it puts a little more emphasis on the independently. That's the determination I think we have to make. Mr. Capello made an argument in his papers that the fact that there were individuals there at all hours to assist is no different than an individual family hiring an aide or employee to provide home care. This is essentially 8 individuals living independently as a single housekeeping unit and sharing the services of an aide or home care professional. If this was an assisted living facility, I think there would be no question also that they would not be living independently. But it's an adult care facility. But there still is a degree of care given to these individuals. The question is, what is the meaning of living independently?
Well, I guess the term living independently means,
You don't need any assistance.
right, they don't require the assistance, they don't require, they're not dependent on somebody else for care.
Okay. I think we have to go to the dictionary. Because the code 200-4A says word of usage shall be decided. If there's no definition, you've got to go to Webster's college, most recent college dictionary.
Which I assume you've looked up that.
Of course. Of course. Independently. Not dependent, such as not subject to control by others. 2, not requiring or relying on someone else, not contingent. 3, not requiring or relying on others as for care or livelihood.
Okay. So are these residents or proposed residents of this house living dependently or independently? I mean, they're living on their own, they have their own room in the house.
But they depend on others to do something.
To a degree.
Do they?
Yeah.
Do they depend on others?
They can, I know, they can come and go as
Please.
they wish.
I think the application was for adults needing some level of intermediate care. Really? Wasn't that the way it was termed in the application?
It was as, group home for adults needing some level of intermediate care. And they did discuss during the hearings to the degree of some of that level of care, which was maybe a reminder that somebody should take their pills, something like that.
Right. Or preparing meals.
They could prepare meals, but my understanding was that people could prepare their own meals. They weren't.
I thought the meals were going to be prepared for them.
I thought the kitchen was going to be used by everybody, but if somebody needed, somebody's there. Well, before we, I just want to ask this, before we still have to figure that out. Can we jump to the last sentence and see if that applies, because then it will make what we're discussing now move.
Well, that does not include a boarding house, a rooming house, or a club, motel, hotel?
Right.
If my feeling, again, people can feel otherwise, but if you're licensed by the Department of Health, you're not a boarding house, rooming house, club,
So that's,
motel,
because of
hotel.
that doesn't fit any of these restrictions that because you're licensed by the board of health. It doesn't matter if they're paying independent, like, I got you.
The Z, Exhibit Z, number 14 in the affidavit of Pamela Brown-Lee says, at the time of commencement of the operation, I will interview and hire other qualified, responsible people to ensure there is someone present on the side to assist the residents on a 24-hour basis.
So that's not independent, that's not being independent.
It's not complete.
Well, we're raising the question. We have to do that with the argument that's made as to, is this similar to a family that has a live-in help? Or is the amount of assistance much larger in this type of facility? There was other evidence as to what was required in the adult care facility, as far as the staffing requirements.
From a licensing standpoint,
Yeah.
on the,
Right. You needed someone to administer the and oversee the daily operations. You needed a case manager to evaluate the residents' needs. You needed a personal services staff to provide resident services, and you needed a activities director, and at least one person qualified to provide first aid must be on duty at all times.
So it sounds like from those requirements, we're really not talking about an independent type facility, because you're required to have staff to assist the residents with certain things.
And the only question is similar to a traditional one, single family that has assistance. Homemade.
Right.
A homemade or a member of the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, but those would be, that would be, your traditional single family that brought somebody in to give assistance. But, what I have a problem with is, I understand what the applicant is asking us to do. And I keep looking back to the legislative intent of our code, and whether or not this is a type of application that the zoning board should sort of be legislating, or whether this is something that the village board ought to do at their level, and if they feel this is an appropriate use in the zone, then it ought to be legislated in, rather than the zoning board carving out exceptions to the code. But I understand the type of application that the applicant is asking, and the determination that they're looking for us to make as to whether this qualifies as quote family, single family under our code. So this is a very tough application. I mean, I understand the use. We received testimony from or affidavits. I wasn't here at the meeting when there was the testimony, but I read the affidavits and I read the minutes, how this establishment was going to be operated. And it didn't seem to me to be that different of an operation than the prior use, other than the fact that you're dealing with adults that need certain level of care, as opposed to mentally disabled and mentally handicapped, except for the fact that there was a push for the mentally handicapped to be mainstreamed and to live in your standard single-family homes. And that was a legislative determination by the state, and I don't think the state has really made the same legislative determination with regard to adult family care. Or adult care, I should say, not adult family care. So, anybody else have any comments with regard to the application?
Are we going to place any restrictions or requirements that if they don't meet what they claim to want to do, that it can be at some point reviewed and perhaps denied?
I think you're allowed to put reasonable conditions on that if you do make a determination that this is a family under the code and it needs to get the next level of licensing, something like that, where it becomes not independent living, but becomes more dependent. We can require them to return to probably the building inspector for his initial determination as to whether that still constitutes a family.
So we would rely on the inspector to...
It would be his interpretation in the first instance as to whether whatever change in, I'm not sure how they would change it, but whatever change that would be, if that still was an important decision.
Yeah, right now, we just determining whether yes or no, whether
determination as to whether this use qualifies as a single family. So, is there any more?
So if we go along and say, okay, this is a single family, can we still, after we agree, can we still put some restrictions or some guidelines that they have to follow?
Well, I guess we can, that it's only being considered a single family based upon the level of independence of the residents of the facility, and that should,
If it changes.
right, should it change so that the residents require more, more care, so that it's no longer considered independent, that they would no longer classify as a single family, if that's the route that the board wanted to take.
It would naturally go then to the building inspector, but I think it would be a good thing for this board to include it in there, really as a reminder that should that level of care change, they are required to go and see if it still qualifies for this use.
Maybe the type of people that entitled to live there may change over time in terms of fact. They might take in people recovering from drugs or still in the process of overcoming drugs.
Do we have a
And what's
mechanism,
to prohibit that?
do we have a mechanism to check or oversee that, to see if that
Well,
changes or happens?
it's licensed by the state, they've got to submit a,
Is there a license?
They have applied for one from what I
right, they have to get a
understand.
certificate of need, is that what they call a certificate of need from the Department of Health?
There's a list of activities where they have to get rid of a particular person if they do it, and I think drug use would be something that they would be compelled to remove it. And the Department of Health would come, I think they do inspections, well, they could do inspection anytime they want, but generally it's every 18 months. They do inspections, but you can, I guess would it be a reasonable condition that our building inspector do an inspection once a year?
I think if you're finding that that use is in accordance with this, you wouldn't
You would
be
be
able
allowed
to
to.
do that.
Right,
But if
that's
there
what I'm
is a procedure in the village's code where if somebody complains, like say they see,
But we have to have complaints. If there's no
Three-
complaint,
right, 3 drug addicts there, they think, they file a complaint with the building inspector would follow up on it, but you
only in
wouldn't,
that case, otherwise we just have to.
right, you wouldn't be able to set regular inspections.
Well, I think,
There is no mechanism to make sure that it doesn't change.
You also wouldn't do that for a
Anybody
real,
else?
like a single-family dwelling that is the traditional single-family dwelling, you
If
don't,
it changes, we wouldn't know unless somebody complained
Exactly.
or brought it to our attention.
and then you would find out what use was going on.
So I think, in my opinion, if something's borderline, you're not gonna be able to see if it goes over the border unless somebody complains.
Right.
yeah, it's going to be a licensed facility, and so the state,
But if they're still operating within the licensing, if there's a change, we're not gonna be able to see what degree the change is.
We possibly could get a look anyway to something that's not before us, but this facility might be subject to the rental law.
But, right, that's
And
just not
that
before you
occasions
right now.
an inspection once a year.
And I wouldn't go too far down this path about trying to monitor future potential changes.
It's not something we can do. It's
Right,
not
deal
what I'm
with what's
saying.
in front of you
So-
right now.
So when you think about restrictions, there's really not a lot of monitoring that can be done, in my opinion, about any type of restrictions that we want to place.
Only,
I mean, we're here for deliberations, the public hearing is closed, but you're the applicant, so,
the only thing I wanted to say is our application is for an adult, so that's what the interpretation we asked you. So if you made an interpretation saying, based upon the fact that these are, independent, single-family adults over this age, then that would be your determination. And if we change, we would have to request a different determination on top of the licensing. So that's if an inspection to ensure that we're doing what we applied for is something you see reasonable, we would not object to it. And the other thing, just on the purpose, there is public health law that has continuing care and independent living for adults as an important aspect. So there is a state and it is in the papers I submitted that shows there is a state intent that these types of facilities for adults in continuing care be there, so it is similar. to
Yeah,
that.
but not classifying them as single-family.
Yes, this is approved housing. Thank you.
All right, well, so where are we?
Well, sure. Well, and also, just, not to add more things to think about, but also if we were to determine that this doesn't meet that definition, am I correct in saying that the next stage would have been the applicant was going to be asking for a variance as well?
Would be a use variance, yes.
Use variance,
So they bifurcated the issue, and they're asking for the interpretations on these things. So if we deny the interpretations that they're seeking, then they can present evidence regarding
Right.
their use variance and their hardship.
And then at that point, if we were to give a variance, we could set conditions upon that.
Right,
Within
however, use variances are quite different, where there's a 4-part test, there's not a 4-part balancing test. If you fail one part of that test, you fail. So it is different from what this board typically sees. So I just don't want the board to look at that as some sort of way to be able to put a condition on. Just, I'd say, take it step by step and really focus on this family issue first.
I can tell you what I think based on how Howard ultimately defined what family is. I don't see this meeting that definition of independent, in my opinion, even though it's a very minor degree of care. It's not completely independent.
It still needs to be some assistance.
Potentially.
And that there's a potential, you gotta assume that potential.
That's the point.
Actually, if you want the dictionary, I think Jim was a copy.
Oh, no, I don't need the dictionary, what I was just saying was in connection with your definition of independently, if a child is living with a family, they also require some level of care. So take all of this into account. If you are saying that a family and a certain, with the level of care that's required, should a child who is
So then they're not an adult.
And again, we're taking into consideration the argument that Mr. Capella made, that it's similar to hiring an aide, a home care professional by a traditional family. That's an argument he made.
That's an argument, but I see it that as being different, but, so why don't we go back and let's take the first step. But we've already talked about the interpretation on the pre-existing non-conforming use and changing a pre-existing non-conforming use to another non-conforming use with the same or more restricted nature. So I think we've already concluded, but not taken formal vote on whether or not we're dealing with changing one non-conforming use to another non-conforming use. Although I think we're all in agreement that we're not talking about a non-conforming use, we're talking about a permitted use as a single-family dwelling. So does somebody want to make a motion, at least with regard to that portion of the application?
First part, yeah, I would make that motion. How would we word it?
the proposed use, that the prior use of the property as an adult home for the mentally disabled was a permitted use, and therefore this does not follow section 200-62C.
So, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do
Took the words out of my mouth.
we have a second on that motion?
How is it?
I'll second.
Okay. So we got Dan, seconded by Howard. So discussion on that motion, which I think we pretty much already agreed that,
We discussed it already.
wait, what was the motion?
It was that the prior use as an adult home for the mentally disabled was a permitted use and therefore did not come under Village Code Section 200-62,
Okay.
something like that.
Something like that, yeah, that's.
Right, so that this is not a change of use from one non-conforming use to another non-conforming use. So we have that, we continued it, so we'll call the question by roll call vote. Dan on the motion? Jerry on the motion, yes? Dick, yes? Howard, yes? I agree, yes, so now we have to move on to question 2. So does somebody want to make a motion whether or not this use qualifies as a single-family dwelling under the current zoning code?
Well, not if it is considered a single-family dwelling, is this a family under the zoning code?
Does it qualify as definitions of family in the zone?
Okay. Is it considered a family? Okay. We want to make a motion with regard to that question?
Well, I'll take it.
Let's switch it up, I'll second.
Well, I'll make a motion that it's not a family because the individuals are not living independently in a single housing unit,
That's defined in the code.
as defined in the code, the current code.
Current code, yeah. I'll second that.
So we got a motion by Howard, seconded by Dan, so let's have a discussion on that motion. So we talked about definition of independence. We've looked at the dictionary as to what independent is. And the question is, are these residents or proposed residents considered living independently within this household, even though it's going to be staffed by, what did you say? What?
By a group.
No, I'm just saying, yeah, what's staff
Staffed by
members?
an administrator to oversee daily operations, case manager to evaluate residents' needs, personal services staff to provide resident services, an activities director, and at least one person qualified to provide first aid must be on duty at all times.
Okay. So, we have a motion. Any further discussion on that? So the motion is that it's not considered a family. So let's call the roll.
Did I get a second?
Yes, Dan seconded. So, Dan, how do you vote for the motion?
I vote, I agree.
You're in favor of the motion.
I will agree, yes.
Jerry, in favor. Dick?
Agree with that.
He's in favor of the motion. And I make it unanimous, so I'm in favor of the motion. Okay. So, Mr. Capelli, your next aspect is to continue with regard to the,
You can hold it and we will determine or gathering evidence as to, whether it's reasonable rate of return for various uses, including religious use, and we will, consider it and, be back
okay,
to
so
you.
when do you want to resume?
I'd ask for 60 days.
60
Do
days?
you want to notify the village when you have that together, and then we can put a notice
Sure.
in the paper? That way, in case it takes more or less time.
Okay. So then, we'll adjourn it without date pending the applicant's notification that he's ready to return, at which time we will renotice it for a public hearing. What about mailings?
The mailings will be redone, and it will all be, it'll be treated as if it's a new application without it being a new application. So all the notices and the mailings will go out.
Okay, so I will make the motion that we adjourn this application without further date pending the applicant's notification that he's ready to return, at which point it will be renoticed as if it was an initial public hearing. Second on the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and your deliberation. This is a tough issue and, we'll consult with my client on the next step, but I would ask this board because I understand your point, and that was the easiest point, which is why before we even submitted a application to this board, while I strongly believe in the application, we petitioned the village board
For the zone change.
to do a simple zone change that would allow this historic building to be used for something that is needed, whether it's assistance or whether it's not. It's an innocuous use that would be in keeping with the village's comprehensive plan, which is to restore these older homes. It would be a centerpiece for the community to be proud of, and it would do something that would, as you saw from the people here, would really benefit this community. Why we haven't gotten a peep or, consideration on this issue, I don't understand. So for any instances that you could, ask your village board members why this is a bad use, because if you look at the other uses that are permitted, whether we get a use variance or not, if we do it for one of the uses that is permitted in this code, it's probably not going to be a single family use. And it's going to be something that, at the end of the day, I think the village would probably say,
I
we wish
understand.
we had that use.
And I, I don't want to speak for the whole board, but I don't think anybody was really ambivalent towards your application. We understand the need of this type of housing in today's society. We have an elderly population, they need types of places to live. And while this seems like it might be a good use, again, from my standpoint, I don't know if it's our determination to make that for the village.
I understand your position, and even if I don't agree, I fully understand it, and that's why I'm saying, it would save everybody a lot of time and money if the village would have had the courtesy of considering this and doing it several months ago. Hopefully they will, consider it. We all understand that would have been the easiest avenue and would have accomplished something that would have been a great benefit for us.
And I want to add, I think Paul was alluding to that it's the fact that we want to, that I myself would love the fact that this old building is being restored and keeping in the community, but that couldn't be a bearing on our decision. So,
I understand that.
I feel bad that they had to be
You're-
had to separate them because
You're residents and your residents, voters, and respected citizens of this village, so I'm asking you to make your voice heard. That's what I'm doing.
Mr. Vaughn, it's a real easy question. They're sitting right there. Ask them why they don't want it. Ask them, he's running for mayor, ask him why he wants to.
We're really out of order at this point,
Hey,
so.
you asked the question, well, they should answer, they're here.
They're not here to answer questions.
Well, I know, he's running for mayor,
Respect-
that's okay. He'll lose his election. On the election.
Okay. Take a 2-minute recess, and then we'll start the next application.
They